Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. I'm Ryan Gilchrest, Managing Editor of Post and Courier's Greenville newsroom. Thanks so much for being with us today. We're going to be talking a bit about downtown development, especially as it relates to things going on in the west end of downtown Greenville and some of the areas around Unity Park. Before we get started, I do want to introduce those who will be joining me today. We've got two reporters. One is Stephanie Mira. She's a reporter here in the Greenville newsroom, primarily covering business, but also other topics. And we also have Connor Hughes, who covers a lot of issues with the city of Greenville. So they should have some particular expertise to share with us today. Before we get started, I do want to put in a plug for a couple of things. One would be, obviously, we all have the folks who are affected by Hurricane Ian on our mind right now, as well as our friends and colleagues down in the low country portion of the state that should be seeing some heavier weather impacts soon. You can follow along with any weather coverage related to South Carolina by going to postandcourier.com. We're in full press weather mode. I'm down that way now, and of course we'll have updates from across the state, including the upstate, as well as the remnants of Ian pass through. So do please check that out for the latest information. We also, of course, want to encourage you to take a look at our various newsletters. Hurricane Wire is one of them that's particularly relevant at the moment, but also keep in mind those up in Greenville as well. And I'll give you some more information on that at the end of this. So let's go ahead and dive right in to the topic. And I just want to start off first by giving Stephanie and Connor both a chance, sort of talk about what's going on in that area of town now, and some of the things to look for, then we'll get into a little more detail. So Stephanie, why don't I start with you? Give us a sense of overall what you've seen with the west end of downtown, what's going on. Not only the things that are happening now, but the things you might soon see.
Yeah, starting at the bridge in downtown Greenville that crosses over the Reedy, once you are walking across that bridge, you come at the intersection of South Main and Falls Park Drive. It's around that area where we are imagining the beginning of the West End. And then the West End extends out, heading towards Academy Street and going up closer to the West Greenville, that side. But it cuts off before it gets to West Greenville. So we're imagining this sprawling area that has not only a lot of commercial and retail aspects that are going to be changing in the coming months here. We have had a lot of businesses close in the West End in the last year, but most of those spaces that have since closed have already been leased and rebought. And so there's a lot of changing of businesses in the West End, a lot of some businesses that are geared more towards tourism as well. And beyond that, we also see other things that are geared towards tourism, such as hotels that are going to be popping up here, maybe as soon as November, construction beginning on hotel, and also residences that are coming to the area, apartment buildings that will not only have some units that are higher end and have a higher price point, but some affordable units as well. So lots of different things going on in terms of an idea that a lot of commercial real estate developers and people in that field would call like the live, work, play concept. Things that are coming to the West End, but also play and work opportunities that are heading that way as well.
Connor, let me go to you then. With all that said, the West End is kind of central to a lot of, of the current city development plans. Talk a little bit about how that fits in, and then, once we've done that, I want to ask you a little bit more about District 356 and some of the areas around Ford Field, but give us a sense of how this fits into the city's overall vision at the moment.
So really what we're seeing at this point is this is kind of the main area where a lot of the redevelopment and growth and revitalization that we've seen along Main Street and that core downtown area is kind of spilling into. It's expanding to this point. As we go forward here, Previous to 2011, it was really all that development and redevelopment was concentrated, as I said, in that downtown area. But kind of the establishment of the Kroc Center, that large community and activity center there on the, right adjacent to where Unity Park is now, really kind of marked, the emphasis and the expansion of that growth and that investment to this area of the city. So that's really a lot of what we're seeing here. There's a lot of opportunity for redevelopment in this area. I think it's where a lot of some of the conflict and the friction is arising is that a large concentration of the special emphasis neighborhoods in the city, which are neighborhoods that are have a higher proportion of low income residents, largely majority minority areas, that's are really concentrated in that area. And the historically Black communities, looking at the southern side community, Viola Street is a little bit north of this area, but it's in the kind of same general area. Haney Serene, Sterling, Academy Street touches a lot of these areas. So that's where a lot of that conversation about revitalization versus gentrification is happening. But there is a tremendous amount of investment. There's room for growth. The development in the main downtown area is fairly established at this point and kind of growing and doing infill. There's a lot of opportunity and room for development kind of on this area that's a little bit more adjacent to that. So that's really what we're seeing. And Unity Park has been a huge part of spurring that, both in anticipation of Unity Park and now that it's established, is really become kind of a magnet for a lot of that development.
So we're going to talk mostly today about what Connor just mentioned, the sort of swath or stretch of development, on that sort of south end of the downtown area over toward the west where it connects to Unity Park. We probably won't, we definitely won't touch on some of the county square redevelopment stuff that's going on. That's adjacent to that as well, but we feel like we can probably do a whole one of these just on that. So we'll pull in Nathaniel Carey at some point to discuss that. But we're going to start sort of at Augusta Street at this point and kind of move to the west a little bit. And Connor, I know the area immediately around Floor Field, District 356, and the other apartments that have gone in there. A lot of that is in place or nearing completion. What's the sort of latest on that?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, District 356 is it's an entertainment district, essentially connected directly to Floor Field, and it's seen as kind of a gathering place, a place where people can, have festivals, things related to games that are happening at Floor Field. It's part of a larger expansion of the ballpark there. And there's just a tremendous amount of new redevelopment that's going on there. There's luxury apartments going in there, new restaurants, things of that nature. And it's kind of centered around that entertainment district in a certain way. So that scene is on some levels, it's a kind of a new gateway to downtown and to the West End. It's an area that essentially connects those two parts of the city. And is really seen as in a lot of ways as a centerpiece there. So it makes the area more walkable. It creates opportunity for, there's mixed use developments going there. So that's really what it was pushed by the city and, a partnership with the owners of the ballpark there. And it was recently opened, and they're seeing that as an opportunity to kind of help spur more development and more foot traffic in that area, both on the West End there and within, the core Main Street downtown area.
Stephanie, let's go to you because kind of moving then still to the west, there's a lot of new developments coming there, including some you've written about recently that are connected to hotels. Tell us a little bit about those and what we might expect to see.
Yeah, so in the last few months, I've written about two major developments that would be coming to that area of the West End close to Floor Field. So there's one that is close to construction. It will be happening around November. And then there's another one that is still in its design phase. So for the one that is close to construction, to orient you all, we are looking at the corner of Rhett Street and North Markley Street. So we're about 100 plus feet from Floorfield, close to where the Hilton Hotel is in the West End. And so that is going to be a boutique hotel with 130 plus units that are key card rooms that will be geared towards just this boutique experience, including some condos as well. So it will be 26 condos, over 130 key card rooms. And so it is definitely a smaller scale hotel than you might see other hotels that have over 200 rooms. And so this hotel is planning to break ground in November. It's been through 2 design review board phases in the last year plus. It came across the design review board originally ahead of the pandemic and had more rooms than expected at that point. But then the pandemic hit, it stopped compressed timeline a little bit, and they didn't get to break ground as expected. And so that allowed them to recuperate and bring it back to the design review board at a smaller scale. And now they're anticipating breaking ground here in November. And so, and you can expect to not only see rooms at that hotel, but also commercial aspects like a tap room and event spaces. And so there's that hotel. And then if you just scoot a little over on Rhett Street, we're looking at 319 Rhett Street. And that is what I'm going to call the project, because it doesn't really have a name at this point other than 319 Rhett Street. And so this one just popped up. It hasn't even come across the design review board yet. That will happen on October 6th, next week. But this project is multifaceted. It has 3 components: a hotel, residencies, apartments, and a commercial aspect. And so 319 Rhett Street, the project is going to be And to situate you all a little better, if you know where the sushi restaurant Otozakaya is, and then there are the Parker Group condos right there, it's going to be fitting into that space and kind of creating this T shape. And so the commercial aspect will be facing South Main Street. It'll be about a 5,000 square foot restaurant. And then behind those 2 properties that are pre-existing, it's basically vacated lot. There's one that's a completely vacant lot, and then there's a vacated building that will be raised and turned into a hotel on one side and residencies on the other side. And so about 150 key card rooms on the hotel side and over 200 apartments on the apartment side, expected to be higher price point apartments. They're in conversation about potentially adding an affordable aspect, but I don't want to say confidently yet that they will be doing such. So that's what we'll kind of see there. But that project specifically, 319 Rhett Street, is still in the design phase, still in the community meeting phase. And so those things could change, while the boutique hotel is most likely set to be what it is today.
So got a couple of follow-up questions on that, but Connor, let me bounce to you real quick. Is it fair to say that, some of these projects that we're talking about, especially given that a lot of them, and we'll talk about more of them here in a few minutes, relate to sort of residential density, this sort of continues to shift the center of downtown to the south, down South Main Street a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's really what's happening here, is that the core downtown area of the city is expanding. That's essentially the meat of what's happening here. It's growing farther west, and really that the city is, looking forward in its 2040 comprehensive plan. That's really what they're looking to do, is encourage residential density, get away from urban and suburban sprawl, find a way to grow responsibly. And that's something they're in the process of implementing a larger codes overhaul, which I think that we may be talking about a little bit more in depth later. But essentially, they're trying to do infill development. There's been a lot of challenges in terms of expanding into the more rural parts of the county. They're looking at a way to do it more responsibly in kind of urban centers that already exist, specifically in the downtown area. What you're going to be seeing a lot of, and what they're trying to promote through this new codes overhaul, is essentially creating nodes that are going to be, the vision for it is mini downtowns throughout the city, where you have mixed use developments, where you have retail, residential, public services nearby, public transportation can get there easily, where people can walk to work, walk to recreational facilities, and have their apartment kind of in the same place. And this is a part of that larger vision for the city, where it's a more centralized plan for growth. And that's really what's happening here, is an expansion of the downtown area into the western part of the city.
Sure. One quick thing, we did have a comment from a reader. I know we have these in the various stories that you've all written, but as we're talking this through, if you have the square footage or the number of apartments or things like that available, toss it in. We'll try to do that for as many of these projects as we can for those of you who are listening in. But what we'll also do is link all of the stories that we've written about this when we put the video up. So we'll try to cover that both ways. The question that comes to my mind, and I know for those who are familiar with the West End, it's definitely something they're going to think about or ask about. And I'll throw this out to either Connor or Stephanie. Where's everybody going to park when we put all these extra people in the West End? Maybe, what's the planning there? I know that some of these projects have parking garages attached.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Connor.
Sure. That is very much something that comes, when you sit in design review board meetings where they're talking about development that's going on in the West End, or, planning commission meetings, it's a conversation that's constantly going on in city council. As these developers are working their way through these official processes, it's kind of a constant dialogue about where people are going to park, how is this going to add to parking. One example that comes to mind is a mixed-use development that's planned again near the Floor Field area. I believe it's a Suncap development, which, if I'm remembering correctly, is a Charlotte-based developer. That's been a huge point of conversation as they work their way through the process. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe the latest is they're talking about a 6-story parking garage that would be open to both residents of this new mixed-use development as well as the general public. So I think that's something that's as this development is happening, is constantly on the minds of public officials, private developers, obviously the people, members of the public who are attending these meetings. It's essentially a constant conversation about, how that's going to fit in. If you're adding all of these new people, where their car's going to go, it's going to create more traffic. It's going to create more demand for parking, as recreational and restaurant options and things of that nature expand, more people are going to be coming to that area. So where are these people going to be parking? And I think they're trying to kind of have a twofold approach, where as development is coming in, they're asking the developers to consider that and incorporate that increased demand into the kind of the mathematics of their development.
Yeah, I know for those of you who may be less familiar with downtown, although I sort of suspect most of the people listening in today are at least relatively familiar with downtown. But there's a number of parking garages downtown, but once you get into the West End, that after River Street, it pretty much drops to zero. So it's a lot of street parking. It's kind of find parking where you can at the moment, but it's also not a high residential area at the moment. And I think a lot of the projects we're talking about ultimately will add, thousands of apartments down in that end. So we'll keep an eye on parking. That's something we do ask about every time it comes up. Stephanie, I want to circle back to you. We've talked a bit about hotels and residential. What about other retail and commercial changes? What else have we covered down that way? What's on the way?
Sure. So like I said at the beginning, a little at the end of last year, starting, I want to say in the fall, we had seen a series of businesses close, most of them being hospitality businesses in the West End. And whenever you see that as a journalist, we always are on the lookout for trends. So we're like, is this going to be a trend? Are these businesses going to be vacated, similar to what we kind of see in North Main Street. I know there's a lot of thriving businesses on North Main Street right now, and a lot of their vacated spots have since been starting to be filled. And so that is a success of that area now. But there are still empty spots that have remained empty for over a year. So as someone who's watching businesses in the West End close, I was like, oh no, are we going to see a trend of that as well on South Main? But a difference on South Main is that when most of those businesses close, so we're looking at things like Husk Barbecue, which is along South Main Street, getting close to O'Neill Street. So we had that close. We had Snackworks close closer to the start of the West End near Falls Park Drive. We had Crafty Cats close further down South Main past the ball field. We had the Old Cigar Warehouse close. So we had a number of these really prominent businesses shutter. But all of the spaces within, if not immediately once those businesses closed, were if not released very soon after. So now in the Old Cigar Warehouse, we'll have New Realm Brewing, which went through the design review board process, really reshaped their idea to accommodate what the concerns were for noise. And now we'll have a brewery in the West End. We'll have Husk is kind of an interesting case study because nothing is there yet. If you know what's there, coming there, please let me know. But Snackworks is going to become a coffee shop. Crafty Cats is going to become a new restaurant. Liberty Tap Room, right next to the ball field, is going to be a new restaurant, the Bellwether, by the creators of the Urban Wren. So we see businesses, these vacated real estate properties immediately be filled, which shows me as like a business reporter that there is a health in that area and people are willing to commit to that area because they feel there's this rush, this growth, opposed to the North End of the North Main, where maybe there is not going to be resident development. And so, yeah, that's something that we will hopefully see in these next few months.
We did have a comment from a reader who's listening in about putting up a map of West End on the screen. Stephanie, I know you and I were looking at a map earlier. I'll describe it to you. You don't have it printed out, do you?
I don't have it printed out, so I unfortunately can't hold it up, but the map is a part of the city of Greenville's, it was a community engagement study. So if we're confident, I can just paste it in the chat. But it kind of it maps out exactly what.
Yeah, if you would, Stephanie, if you could put a link to that in the chat. For those of you who aren't clear, exactly where West End, what all West End incorporates. If you start at the river and head south, everything on down South Main and Augusta Street at that point, all the way up to about the high school, Greenville High School, and then on the other side, all the way to Academy Street. And then that goes all the way down to the intersection with Spinks and Burger King, sort of the entrance to Village of West Greenville. That's the area we're talking about. So it's sort of it's narrow at the northern end of it, but it is sort of a very broad area at the southern end. And as we mentioned, it incorporates a lot of not just retail and commercial, but also some residential. We are already starting to run short on time, so we've got to get to this other piece. We want to go just a little bit further east, and I kind of want to talk just a little bit about first the Mosaic and also some of the things going on with affordable housing in Unity Park. So I know you got an update this week on the Mosaic. Tell people what that is and what's happening there.
Sure. So the Mosaic is a mixed-use development that is being that has been proposed for West Greenville. It's essentially off of Academy Street there. It's near the West End or the West Side neighborhood, or essentially will be right in that community. And it's really an interesting intersection of a lot of the conversations that we're having about this. It's right near Unity Park, essentially across from the Kroc Center there. And it's a partnership between these private developers and the Greenville Housing Fund. So there will be affordable housing included as part of that project. And I know that you guys had asked for more specific numbers, so I looked it up. It's roughly 120 units. It's going to be divided between apartments and townhomes with affordable options, and we'll accept housing vouchers. And it's run up against some considerable opposition from the existing community there that are worried that the imprint in the neighborhood will not fit with the kind of existing identity there. And so there's been COVID played a role in it as well. It was initially proposed in 2020, and it's been gone through the channels and kind of they've had to go back to the drawing board a couple times. They faced that opposition. And one thing that was interesting, so it was on City Council's agenda for this past meeting, ended up being deferred. And talking with some of the my sources that are aware of what happened there, the reason was that they were asking for downtown zoning for a portion of that property, which shows that there is kind of becoming this blurred line, this question of where downtown Greenville actually officially begins. And there was concern at this point that wouldn't fit the character of that area to have that kind of zoning there. And that was essentially why it was deferred. But I think that goes to speak a bit to the question of where the line actually begins on where downtown is, that these developers were hoping to kind of incorporate it into that. And part of the reason they were doing that was to try to, I think, set people's minds at ease, because that comes with it, certain aspects of it would have to go through the design review board. So it adds an extra layer of accountability there. But that was essentially a kind of a deal breaker, it sounds like, for some officials, and they asked them to go back to it. But, again, it kind of gets to, it's a mixed use development, so it's going to be an addition of retail and commercial space if it goes through, as well as a significant amount of residential development with some of this affordable housing incorporated. As I mentioned, there's quite a few special emphasis neighborhoods directly surrounding this. So trying to address some of that issue and some of that displacement as this development happens, and then how that actually is butting up against the residences and the communities that exist there now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that particular development as it goes forward. I think in a lot of ways it's a bellwether for a lot of the development that's been happening in that area.
Pretty recently, there was a discussion about 4 new developments coming in next to Unity Park, a lot of them geared around affordable housing. Can you give us a quick update on that as well?
Yeah, sure. So it looks like I think it'll be about 375 affordable units. I think a little over 400, if I'm remembering correctly, total units. But it'll be a mix of apartments and condos, come right there off of Unity Park. And what that really is that community in particular, of course, Unity Park used to be, that area used to house Mayberry Park, which is an all-black park in the earlier part of the 20th century. Went away. The community there had been pushing for a park to be in that neighborhood for a long time. As a lot of this development began in that area, that was when the push for Unity Park happened. There was a massive public investment there. Now we have this huge 60-acre park that accounted for close to $70 million of investment so far from the city and public-private partnerships. And there's a lot of concern that amount of public investment is displacing people in that area and pushing people out. So the city's really, their answer to that was to invest quite a bit in terms of land and capital investment, accounting for millions of dollars into establishing affordable housing there. So it is a significant investment. They're pushing for that. They're trying to keep people in that community who are established there and create options for people who may be being priced out of their houses and buy all of this public investment. Critics are saying maybe too little, too late. They are trying to move forward with it pretty quickly, with the first apartments going on possibly in 2023, more likely in 2024, 2025, probably 2024 time range. But it's just part of that balancing act of trying to maintain and preserve established communities while this development is happening.
Right. Okay, we are definitely running short on time. We did have a couple other reader questions. I think they're short answers though. Connor, quickly, where does the city's reworking of its codes and various zoning practices, where does that process stand at the moment?
So they're hoping to have a draft ordinance available by the end of the year. That's been a pretty in-depth, comprehensive process. They contracted with the planning group to fully go through and completely, basically take the old code, kind of throw it out the window essentially, and totally revamp the way that they plan growth in the area. So as I mentioned, there will be a draft ordinance likely available by the end of this year. And then there'll be an ongoing public process there to kind of finalize that.
Okay, and Stephanie, one quick one to you. Another question that came in from a reader. The Borden building across from the post office on Washington Street, which is just a little up the hill from the apartments that we were just talking about next to Unity Park. What's happening with that building?
The Borden building, the former ice cream plant, is becoming multi-tenant offices. And so they're currently under construction of that property and leasing out to potential tenants.
Okay. All right. So that is all of the questions we had today. Obviously, we could talk about growth in various pockets and parts of Greenville over and over and over. As I mentioned, we'll probably come back and do another one of these on a different part of town. In about 6 months or a year, we probably need to do this one again because so much is changing around Unity Park and especially in the West End, where there's a significant swath of development that is either underway, planned, or coming, and we just don't know about it yet. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching Beyond the Headlines. We'll post a recording of this on our website soon, in case you want to watch that. As I mentioned, we'll try to include the links with that as well to stories that we've written related to this. You can see that at postandcourier.com/beyond-the-headlines. You can support our work by signing up for any of our free newsletters at postandcourier.com/greenville/newsletter-sign-up. You can also just go to postandcourier.com and look for the newsletters link at the top of the page. Paid subscribers make our push to cover every corner of South Carolina possible. Please do consider a paid digital subscription. You can look at that on our website in the top right-hand corner where it says subscribe. You can also support our investigative efforts. If you go to our homepage and scroll down a bit, there are ways to support the investigative work that we're doing as well. On behalf of Stephanie and Connor and the entire Post and Courier staff, we thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day. Be safe out there. We'll see you next time.